Good afternoon, everybody. We are so glad that you are here for our first Discover webinar of 2026. Today's webinar, Start Smart to be Year-End Ready, is going to provide you with great tips over important setup steps for 1099 vendor records, clergy payroll, payer information, so that you can be year-end ready this year. Our presenter today is Jennifer Nelson, our support engineer, and other members of our team that are here today include Alex Clay, our CEO, Sherry Snedden, our support manager, Christy Sauls, our conversion specialist, Chris Widener, our marketing specialist, and myself, Julianne Manning, our product specialist. Our next Discover webinar is March 24th, which is Payday Made Easy. We're going to be focusing on payroll direct deposit and payroll access and engage, to name just a few things that we'll cover. So definitely check that out. You do not want to miss it. Also, make sure you save the date for our successful contributions with CDM Plus training. Last year was our first year we kind of did this type of training over successful bookkeeping, and it was, as you might have guessed, successful. So we definitely wanted to continue these training options, and this year we wanted to focus on contributions. With these trainings, you get tons of resources and videos that are especially curated for just this event, and you can use these over and over again. These come in handy when you need to train new staff, for instance. You always have them as a resource to look back on. So definitely be on the lookout for more details about the contributions training. And next, I can't believe it, but we are already starting to plan and prepare for our 2026 annual users conference. This year is going to take place September 22nd through 24th in the beautiful Charleston, West Virginia. So again, very, very soon, more details will be coming out, but definitely put those dates on your calendar. We would love to see you there. It's always a great, great time. We're so glad everyone's here. We really believe that Jen is going to give you some tips and tricks. And if we think through some steps that we can take now, it will make that year end go more smoothly. So without further ado, Jen, please help us. It looks like this crowd needs a little bit of your help.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope that even though a lot of you do wait till the end, that these will give you some great things to do now so that you don't have to do so much at the end. You don't have to do a lot of cleanup, so that when you do wait till December to even start thinking about it, or January, depending on what type of personality you are, it'll just go a lot smoother for you. And that's my goal here. The first thing that I want us to talk about is you want to make sure that your payer information is set up properly. This payer records here, it feeds your 1099s as well as your W-2s. So you do want to make sure that this is all set up properly. You can access it underneath the payroll section of the program. And here is where you'll store your federal EIN number, a state EIN number if you have your state taxes. The things you want to really make sure is that your phone number is formatted properly and that your email address and everything's in here. You just want to have all of your information. If maybe you've changed bookkeepers throughout the year or what have you, that this just stays up to date. That's just gonna, again, one other step that you won't have to do when you go to run your 1099s or your W-2s. It will pull from this particular information. And so you want to go in here and get that set. Once that's set, let's talk about our 1099s first. A bit of information that I just actually found out is the limit is going to go up this year. It used to be that you had to send a 1099 to anybody that you paid over $600 to. Now for the 2026 year that you'll file in 27, the limit is $2,000. That's a very big jump, which I think we'll find will be very helpful. And a lot of us might not even need to do 1099s in the coming year. But just something I wanted to make you aware of, that the limit is going to jump to a $2,000. So anything over $2,000 that you pay them this year, you will have to give them the 1099. If you do less, then you don't need to worry with it. But when you're thinking about your 1099s and your W-2s and all of this year and stuff, you want to think with the end in mind. So when it comes to your vendors, if you're not sure if you're going to end up giving them the $2,000 since the limit's so high, but you do know you're going to be paying them something, it's better to go ahead and just set them up as a 1099 vendor. When you go at the end of the year to generate your 1099s, it's going to just look for any vendor that was paid over that $2,000 limit. So you don't need to worry and just say, oh, I set cash as a 1099 vendor, but I actually only ended up paying him 1,500. That's okay. The system will go ahead and just not generate a 1099 for them. But if you're not sure, it's better to just go ahead and have it all marked. And the reason you want to do that is because if you set it ahead of time, as you're paying them, the line items can get marked to go on the 1099. And I'm going to show you what that is. So let's take cash, for example. Let's say cash is going to mow our lawn for us this year. And maybe it's going to cost more than the $2,000, or I'm not even sure, but we are going to pay him every time he does our lawn. So here I'm going to set him up as the 1099 NEC. I'll go over to, let me scroll over here, the 1099 setup, and I'm going to put what payer that I have and what vendor, the name that I want to have displayed on my 1099s. So you have your vendor name, and if you look, you have other options here of your contact name, contact first name, contact last name. And that's just what these fields are right here. You also want to make sure you have, if it's an individual, you want their social security number. If they are a company, you can put their, whatever their ID is, you want to put that information in ahead of time. So again, you don't have to go tracking down everybody's, social security numbers, EIN numbers, whatever number they need to give you. And now you're later getting your 1099s out because they're just not getting back to you. So look at it now so that you can generate that 1099 without having to go out and grab that information from them. When you set this as a 1099 NEC, any payment that you pay them is going to automatically be marked for the 1099. For example, if I go up here and I go to create an invoice record for cash, what you're going to see in the info right here is 1099. If you click this little gear, you can see how it's checkmarked to show up on that 1099. Let's say I give, I'm reimbursing cash for gas or something else that is just a straight reimbursement, something he went out and purchased for us, what have you, and I don't want that on the 1099. I can simply click this line and uncheck that. That then means that one line item will not show up on that 1099. But it's so much easier to go ahead and mark them as a vendor and uncheck it for the one-offs than to have to go at the end of the year and have them all checked because we just didn't set it up ahead of time. If it does happen to where, let's say this here is not supposed to be on the 1099, we have created what we call a little toggle setting. If it has an asterisk by it, then that means it's going to show up on the 1099. If I don't want it, this particular one on the 1099, I just simply click that little button and that asterisk disappears. So this particular line item now is not going to show up on the 1099. It does it per line item. So if I click this and I hit toggle, it's only going to do this $200. It is not going to do the full $500 invoice, which is something you just want to keep in mind. So if you go and you're generating your 1099s, it's a little higher than you think, you can come in here and say you forgot to uncheck the reimbursement. You simply come right in here and toggle that so that it is no longer marked. So those are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to just making sure things are set up properly. Now there are a couple. You have your 1099 miscellaneous and your 1099 NEC. And the majority of the vendors that you have are more than likely going to fall into this NEC section. The IRS brought that back a few years ago, and most of your vendors will fall under that. However, if you're not sure what vendor, if it's NEC or if it's miscellaneous and things like that, the IRS website really does have a great, here are types of vendors that would fall under miscellaneous. Here are the types of vendors that would fall under the NEC. You can look at that off their website and then make a decision based off of the information that they have here. If you're still not sure, you can check with like a CPA or tax, or even just give them a call and they'll be able to help you as well. But their website, I think you'll find, will be really good. So that's just your basic. Again, it pulls from that payer record. If you notice, we had two payer records in our window earlier. And when you click this drop down, you would see both of those. So whatever payer record you have in there, it's going to go into here. Once you get all of that set, now every time I go to create an invoice, it'll be set and ready to go onto that 1099. It's just a couple of little simple things that you can do ahead of time to save you a lot of headache. A big one for us was always the getting their account numbers or their social security numbers. And man, it saves you a lot of time because they're not always as fast at getting back to us as we would like when you're in the middle of doing it right then. Let's move to payroll. It's one of the biggest things that we run into at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, in our case in January, when everybody's going to do their W-2s. I'm going to go over a couple of things that would really help you, especially in the case of clergy. The clergy is probably one of the most calls that we get where clergy maybe wasn't set up properly, their housing wasn't set up properly, or taxes were taken out, weren't taken out, and just a lot of questions. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll have a little clearer understanding of some things you can do that will help you not run into that. We do have a great link in our help center that is specifically for setting up clergy payroll. Kind of what I'm going to go over today is just a little bit of what is in there in the help center, but it's a great article. It's got some great images and things like that that will kind of help you through that. But the one thing with clergy, let me go ahead to an employee record. They are a dual tax status. What I mean by that is for federal, they're considered an employee. They would receive a W-2. They will have to pay the federal tax on it. Now, with clergy, they do not have to have federal tax withheld, so the church doesn't have to do the withholding. But they still have to get a W-2, and at the end of the year, they still have to report all of that and pay it. And actually, if they aren't having the federal, it's best for them to pay it every quarter. But they're dual tax, so they'll have the federal income tax. They're considered the employee. However, when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, the minister is considered self-employed. Whereas like the non-clergy employees, they would pay their FICA and Medicare, and the church or the employer pays the same portion. We pay as an employee that much, but then as the employer, you pay the same thing. It's a matching thing. Well, the clergy, since they're considered self-employed, actually at the end of the year ends up paying both together because they're self-employed. They would fill out a form that's a Schedule SE with their tax return. Because of that, you will want to set their pay item box for their salary exempt, because you are not, as a employer, and for them as an employee, they cannot have FICA and Medicare withheld from their pay. They have to handle it themselves. Now, my husband is a senior pastor, and I have worked in here as well as in our denomination state office for years, and I can tell you that can cost a lot of money for a clergy at the end of the year, and it can be a heavy hitting thing. What we do, this is just something that we do just to kind of give you a suggestion, is I take that percentage and figure it up. I take his salary, we figure up the percentage, and I actually have the additional amount withheld from his federal. So it kind of balances out. So we don't have so much out of pocket to pay. We just have overpaid federal that amount. You can do that. It's not something like we're going to say a CDM. This is highly recommended. It's just a suggestion of a way if the pastor's like, I don't want to pay all of that at the end of the year. Well, they can pay it throughout the year if you just do it for the add-on amount. The thing with your ministers, well, as the clergy is, yes, they don't have to have federal withheld, but they can tell you that they want it. If they tell you they want it withheld, you can uncheck that exempt so that it will go ahead and withhold tax, federal tax, based off of the tax table. And then if they do choose to have any additional, it'll add that to it. So let's say, $50 is what the tax table figures up for him, but he or she wants an additional $200 added to it. It'll take that $50 from the tax table and then it put 200 on top of that, and it will withhold that much from it. Whether they have it exempt or not, you have to have this exclude from W-2 unchecked for your federal, and if you have state taxes, for your state. This exclude from W-2 is box 1 on the W-2. So if you were to check this, now it's not going to show up in box 1. So when you call and you're like, I'm doing the W-2 and nothing for the pastor, there's nothing showing in box 1. I can see, other stuff, other people, but just nothing here. That's because you have this checked. So you want to make sure that is unchecked for their salary. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with that is they can also have housing. So they can claim a portion of their cash compensation as housing. That amount, though, has to be approved by the governing body of the church or the organization and documented in their minutes. Housing allowance is not subject to federal tax, but it's got to be included in their calculation for their self-employment tax. And they handle that at the end of the year when they do their reporting. When you're setting it up, though, for your minister, then you go in here and everything is checked as far as taxes go. But here's where the difference lies. It doesn't show on their box 1, but you put it in a special box here. It's box 14, other, and you title it housing. So housing allowance on the W-2 would belong in box 14, marked other, with housing as your description. So the reason we check this box is if you were to have that unchecked, now the housing amount is going to show in box 1 and box 14. And you don't want that because then he's double paying there. You want to undo or check this so that it does not show in box 1 and only shows up in box 14. So everything would be exempt as far as that goes. Now, when you are doing, the other thing I want to talk about are deductions. We had a lot of questions regarding retirement and just how to get all that kind of set up properly so that you don't have issues with your retirement at the end of the year when you go to do your W-2s. So when an employee wants to have their pension, a portion of their salary given towards their pension or their retirement, you would set that up in the deduction setup. It is reducing their, I can't click and do that at the same time. It's going to reduce their salary. So they're telling you, I want you to take a portion of my gross and I want you to give that towards my retirement. So when you do that, you set it up here. So we've got one set up for pension. That then for this one would go box 12 code E, but if you can see, there's all kinds of different boxes. So you want to check depending on what they have. So for example, what we're going to talk about today would be specifically the 403B, but there are others like an IRA and all that kind of stuff. So you want to, if it's not a 403B, you want to check with the like a CPA or tax person to find out where it needs to go on the W-2 and how it needs to be handled. But for the webinar today, I just want to stick with the 403B, and that would go in box 12 code E. You set that on the deduction side. And this 403B would be pre-tax. So we're going to check all of this. That just means it's going to take this off as a gross, and then it will calculate the taxes for their payroll. Put in your frequency, in your vendor, and what account number you want to have. You can set your calculation for it here. You don't have to if you leave it at 0. So like say you have an employee, several employees that use the same one, you can do that and you would set it on the employee record, which we'll look at here in a second. So once you get that record created, then you'll go in here and you create the deduction, or you add the deduction. When you hit add deduction, you're going to see the list of the deductions that are created from the deduction setup window. You would choose your pension, set the amount for whichever the frequency, every pay, once a month, whichever they've chosen, you put in that amount. We will default this information because we pull it from the deduction setup window. Now, the thing you want to keep in mind is you don't need to do anything with your pay items. Your pay items are just set. You're saying, I always, when I explain it at the AUC conferences or other people over the phone, a pay item is you giving them the money. This is there, it's in. The deduction is taking the money out of what you said you're going to give them. So if the employee is wanting a portion of their retirement to be taken out of their salary, you don't need to do anything here. You would just put the deduction. Now, if you have, let's say, housing that you don't put it in with their check. Our former pastor had housing given to him once a month. Well, he didn't want his deduction to be run because he had it run every time they calculated payroll. We've set this here. You can check that box. Now, anytime you generate a housing check, it's not going to run that deduction. So you can do that with your pay items, but you do not have to add like a retirement pay item or anything like that, because you don't need that. It's coming out of their salary. Now, I will say, if you look at your payroll settings for your employees and you see that you have something here called retirement, which is something that we saw a little bit of an uptick on this year, you just want to keep in mind that it's not set as tax exempt, it's not set as an allowance, or anything like that. If you do create one or you have one in here that says retirement, that's salary. And that salary is handled however your pastor salary is handled, is the same setup that you want to have your retirement handled. So for example, let's say he or she was not going to have federal tax withheld. When you do your retirement one, or if it's on there, you want to make sure it's set the same way, but these boxes are not checked. If they do have federal, or they want the church or the organization to withhold federal tax, then when you do the retirement, you want to make sure that that is unchecked. But the thing I really want to stress, it is not necessary on here, but I know there are users that do have it on there. So if you do, make sure you change it to an allowance or a salary if it is an allowance, and that your taxes here are set up the same way as your salary so that it is all there. The other thing to keep in mind, if you're giving the money, so if the salary is the complete base pay for the employee, and then you add a retirement pay item, you're giving them that much more money. So you either need to make sure that salary is reduced by the amount, or however you guys want to have it set. But again, it is not necessary. I personally don't use that. I like to just lean on the deduction, let it just reduce the salary, because that's what the employee is wanting done. The other thing I totally forgot, and I just want to bring it back up, with the FICA and the Medicare for your clergy, there is the organization or the church can give them their portion of it. So like their half, they can add that to the pay quarterly, but again, it's salary. So it's like, let's say it's $200. Well, every quarter you would give them the $200, but it's salary. You are allowed to do that, but that's as far as it goes to what the church can do to help with their Social Security and their Medicare. Those are some of the biggest things that I would say you really want to go through your employee records and make sure they're set up with that information on it. It's just going to save you running into issues down the road when it comes to running your W-2. One of the biggest things that if you don't use it, I highly recommend, it's going to be very helpful for you, is what we call a taxable income summary. And I want to walk through this report for you because it really is the key, I think, to making sure your 941s and your W-2s are in balance with what happened inside the program. With the taxable income summary, there are a couple of ways you can do the report. First of all, you need to run it on date paid if you're going to try to balance with your 941 or your monthly payment or your W-2s. The IRS does not care what your pay period is at all. What they care about and what the W-2s and the 941s monthly, everything you do with the IRS, they look at when did you give them the money? And that's what they pull it off of. So when you're running a taxable income summary to balance with it, you want to make sure that it is set by date paid, not pay period. Where you run into this a lot is like the end of the year, if your pay period goes into the prior year, but you paid them the next year, things like that. Get into the habit of using date paid when it comes to doing this for your taxes. When you click on the report button here on the left-hand side, there is a couple of things you can do, and I'll show you the difference between composite and detail in a second as well. But you can run it for federal, which will include your Social Security and your Medicare. But you can also tell it to run for your state and local. So it'll kind of help you print that and stay in balance with what your state and your local have as well. When you run this, well, let's make it to where you can see the whole thing. And zoom in. All right, couple things we're going to notice here. You have, this is the day it was paid. This is the pay period, so it can help you if you're doing, running and you like to look at the pay period, you can still do that. But it's going to print the report based off of date paid because of how I set my search. You have your gross, your allowance. In fact, we'll go down for a second here. This is one of the clergy. The gross, this was the housing that they had set. And so it totaled it up so you can kind of see. However, this is the window that you want to look at. When we were looking at the clergy in the employee record, that particular clergy was initially set to not have federal withheld from the organization. And so because of that, the organization is not going to have anything taxable. So the W-2, the 941s, they don't have to submit that payment because nothing was taken from the employee's pay. They will have to handle that on their own. That's what this field here is. This column here, this W-2 column, that's what's going to show on box 1. This is why this particular summary is so important. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more for you. This will tell you that notice 1750 is going to show on box 1 from this particular payroll, not the 2500. That is because 750 of it was marked for housing. So this will tell you really quick what's going to show on their W-2 and what's withheld. So if we go up to a non-clergy employee, this is the taxable. This is what was on their W-2, and this is how much was withheld from their pay. The same goes with FICA and Medicare. This is what's on their W-2 when you print their W-2. This is right here is what the 941s, all that's going to figure that is going to have to report, and same with then the withheld. So this report is so helpful because if you run it, even if you don't run it by composite, if you run it detail, it lists it all out by employee. But at the end, it tells you how much your pay should be. Or in this case, I ran it for the whole year, so I'll be able to see what it all totals up to being. If I run it as composite, it just is a little bit less. So if you have a lot of employees and you pay them weekly, detail can be quite the report. Composite just does a composite per employee for the period that you set. So if you're going to do your monthly, say you're a monthly filer, and you go to do your monthly payment, right here would be just some things that helped me when I did this. I print this out monthly and I go here. This total here should be when I go to my mark invoices to pay and I mark all of my invoices for the month or quarter, whatever your filing is, that should match this total right here. If it doesn't, I've already found a problem and I need to figure out why it doesn't match. So if it matches, I go ahead and I pay it. I print this report personally so I know and I stick it with where I made the payment. I go to the next month, I do the same thing. Then every quarter, I generate the same report, but for the quarter. Now, if I was to add up all 3 of those months, that should match what this figure here is for my quarter. I know I'm staying in balance with my 941s now. Well, then at the end of the year, I can take my 4 quarters, add them up, and that should match this pay figure here for the end of the year. Now I know that my W-2s are going to be in balance with my 941s, which is what I need. And you will have little to no issues. Really, you won't have any issues. I've not run into any when it comes to at least balancing your figures, as long as this is run by date paid. And throughout the year, you keep up to make sure you're staying in balance as you pay it, as you report your 941s, and so on. Yeah, when I do things like this and I stay in balance, I can do my W-2s and just be done. It's very, very simple. That's why we really wanted to take time today to show you a few things that you could set ahead of time so that you don't have that stress in your W-2s. You see it and it's not right and you don't know what to do. You can't figure out what's wrong. And then you figure it out and now you don't know how to fix it. And we're always happy to help you with it. But if you can do it throughout the year and you can set the things up like we've talked about here in the employee record and setting up for the exempt, setting up all that kind of information, setting up your deductions properly, putting your housing to show on box 14 and things like that, then at the end of the year, you'll find that your stress level will at least be a little lowered in the sense that it's balanced. I know it's stressful when you deal with anything with the IRS, but it's at least going to be in balance and you won't have that stress of trying to figure out what's wrong. So we really wanted to take that extra time to kind of let you see all the few little things that you could go through and just check and see, is this set up this way? If not, let me go ahead and change that now so that I don't have any problems. Or if you don't print that taxable income summary report when you do your payments or your 941s, maybe that's something you can add to your system or your process that you do when it comes time, just so you can always try to make sure you're in balance with things.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming today. We're so glad that you were able to join us for our first Discover webinar. Lots and lots of good information. So hopefully you guys were able to pick up on a few tips and tricks so that your year end isn't quite so laborious once it comes back around again, because it always does, always comes back. But if you have any questions, or maybe you just want a member of our team to kind of take a look at your specific database, are things set up correctly, or even just questions on how can I set things up now so that I do have a smooth year end, feel free to contact our 5-star support team at support@cdmplus.com. They will definitely, talk with you, to work with you, set up a call if need be, but they're definitely a great resource, so make sure to take advantage of that. Also, I noted that there's someone who mentioned that they just assumed this position. Please know that we do offer training to CDM Plus, so definitely reach out to our support team. They will go over some work with you and figure out what you need to be trained on. So definitely know that that is an option. We do have our Saran Help Center. This is a great place where there's several step-by-step support articles as well as walkthrough videos. You can also contact support through this website. So this is definitely a great resource, so make sure to check it out. Again, thank you so much for coming today. We hope that we see you for our March Discover webinar, Overpaid Day Made Easy. But we hope that you have a great rest of your day. So see you next time.